Okay, hey folks, Mark Locklear here with a screencast on the final project review. So let me share my screen here. So the goal here was, I initially had an additional chapter in this course, but what I decided to do is rather than sort of throw the final project on you without any feedback. I feel like it's somewhat of a shot in the dark, especially if you're not as comfortable with creating a database from scratch with requirements. So my sort of goal here and my hope was that rather than having an additional chapter and just giving you a week to do the final project, essentially I'm spreading the final project out over the last 2 weeks of class. Also, it at least gives you a chance to at least work on the basics, the sort of core part of your entity relationship diagram that you're going to develop for the final project, be able to share that, and then for me to sort of sanity check that with you and then give you feedback on it. So that's sort of a little about that's a little about what my thinking is for the final project review. So there's really sort of two parts here. You'll have a link to the final project here. First off, I want to make a note about that, being explicit, that I'm explicitly asking you not to use any AI tools for this. It just really should be, my hope is that, based on everything we've talked about up to this point, you really should be able to implement, at least the vast majority of the requirements here. And so it's going to take a little bit of asking me questions, number one, and also using the book as a resource and sort of going back through the book and trying to identify, where the various requirements show up at there so you can get more details. But I'm asking you not to use any AI tools uh, in the development of this assignment. Okay, so with that being said, the sort of nuts and bolts here are what I'm asking you to do is the first thing you should do is go ahead and read through these requirements. I'll just read through the first paragraph and then just sort of hit the high points from there. So, the wedding planning agency, Elegant Occasions, specializes in organizing and coordinating weddings for clients. Okay, so this is a wedding coordinator, which is actually kind of um, very germane for Asheville, right? Big wedding destination. So plenty of wedding planners in town. The agency offers a range of services, including venue selection, catering, floral arrangements, photography, entertainment. The objective of this project is to create a database system to manage client appointments and wedding details. Okay. So think about this. This sort of use case, the sort of practical use case for this is, someone's getting married. They're going to contact this agency. So the agency is fielding people contacting them to inquire about wedding planning services. And again, these wedding planning services do everything from things like choosing flowers, choosing the venue, and then actually the actual wedding day too. And so the idea is that this system should be able to represent and manage all of these various pieces. So what I'm asking you to do for this first phase of the review process that you're going to submit is you're going to go ahead and develop your ERD. So again, we'll be using DB diagram here. That's the online tool that we've used previously. So you wanted to develop your diagram there. But you probably just going to want to scratch some things out on paper first. That's how I would get started. The core of this is going to be these these data points I have listed under the entity relationship diagram section, and then also the business rules too. And in fact, you can see that's what these requirements are here. I basically just pasted them from out of the document into there. So what I'm asking you to do, the deliverables for this assignment are going to be, again, the DB diagram, actual ERD. So you'll be submitting a URL or a link to that. And then I'm also asking you to note, I'm also asking you, in addition to the URLs, I'll also provide a narrative about the ERD. So I want you to actually cut and paste these bullet points into a document. It could be a text document or Microsoft Word, Google Doc, whatever you want to use. Cut and paste them, and then say a sentence or two about each one. So again, if I'm reading through here, so I'll just take the first one. You know, clients can have multiple appointments, but only one wedding. So the narrative you might respond with, and again, this you're going to have to develop your entity relationship diagram first. But once you've developed all of your tables and the relationships between those tables, for instance, here you might have something like you say again, clients can have multiple appointments, but only one wedding. Again, this is just an example, but it might say something like, you know, there's a one-to-many relationship between clients, you know, between the client's table and the wedding table. And again, depending on the table names that you choose, you might want to modify that some, and then any other, again, any other narratives around those things. And also, you know, if that constraint is in place, you may want to say a word or two about or a couple of words about the constraints that you've got in place to enforce that. Okay. So that's when I say the narrative around each one of those, I'm looking for, again, for you to tell me about it here, what the specific relationship is, and then I should be able to see that inside the entity relationship diagram you've got to. Let me also say that there's a sufficient amount of ambiguity in these requirements that I've got here. And the reason that is, I mean, you know, if the requirements were 100% unambiguous, then essentially I would have to give you the solution, right? So, I mean, real life to some level is ambiguous, right? Imagine that, I mean, and what I'm trying to mimic here is imagine in the real world, you would be meeting with this wedding planning agency to create a system for them. And so even though you have a conversation with them about what their requirements are and what their needs are, there's always going to be some amount of ambiguity there. And then there's also some amount of liberty you're going to have to take within creating the database. And there's probably some assumptions you're going to have to make too, because everything's not 100% clear. So, so I say that to say there's no one right answer here. I think the big thing is as long as you can defend the choices you've made, that's really what I'm looking for. And, you know, again, I mean, within a certain spectrum, everybody's going to fall on that. There's probably going to be a client's table or a user's table, right? And that's going to be people who are contacting you to, you know, people who are contacting you about a service. There's probably going to be an appointments table, right? Because that's sort of a core part. But, you know, outside of those things, there's going to be some variance. And again, even within those names, you could have clients, you could have users. I mean, there's different things there's different names you could call things. So again, I want you to, I mean, the other thing is, it's often important what makes sense to you. There's an old saying in software development, which is naming is one of the hardest things in software development. So often naming things can be difficult because a given thing can do different things. So you should also name things in a way that's comfortable for you and what makes sense for you. So that's sort of what I'm looking for there. I'll just scroll through here and hit a couple of these too. You know, each appointment should have at least one service associated with it, right? So again, you're probably going to have you're going to have something that looks like an appointments table. That appointment table is probably going to have a date, you know, assigned to it. So again, just think logically about what these things do. And then appointment's going to have a service too. And remember, we talked about the various services that you can provide. So it could be flowers, it could be catering, it could be food. You know, I don't know. There's different ones. So you know, this may require, the other thing is you may say, well, hey, I don't know anything about catering services. So sometimes it's worth doing some research on your own. So you may want to do some research on your own about just what do wedding planning services do? What are all the potential things that they can do? And if you Google wedding planning services and look at a couple of websites real quickly, and then, you know, usually websites have a services tab that you can go to. Look at some actual like real live wedding planning services and see what services they offer, because that'll sort of give you hints about what you can include here. Implement constraints I've got. Again, you can go back and look at the relevant chapters that we've covered in the MIRAC book for constraints. Now, this is the database install scripts and the setup scripts. That's for the actual final project, not for this database review, but I'll go ahead and talk about that while I'm here too. Again, what I'm looking for here is something similar to the create database SQL file. This is in your DB_setup folder. This would be in the download if you downloaded the student files and for the MIRAC book. And I'm going to open that. So this is, again, this is a SQL script that I can actually run. And if I should be able to run this and actually create your database locally on my system. And so you're going to have you're going to have a create database statement at the top, a use statement, and then you're actually set up. And again, this should be what I'm seeing, what's inside your DB design document that you share with me, your ERD, your entity relationship diagram should mimic what's inside your actual setup folder. So those two things should be in sync. And again, if you use the export function, export is SQL from the dbdesign.io website, so when you export that, it should give you these setup tables just like we see them here. So that would be my recommendation, is do all of your work inside your DB design, your ERD diagram website, and then export from there. And if you make changes, you need to sort of keep things up to date. If you're working back and forth between these two documents, just make sure you keep them in sync. Okay. But again, all of your databases or all of your tables are properly defined here. Again, you want to think about things like not just the table names, but the attributes in the tables, then also the data types that are associated with those. And then also constraints. We talked about that some, having the proper foreign key constraints in place. And then any indexes that you feel like might be important. And again, you want to defend those, if you feel it's necessary. And then insert statements, fine. And you don't have to go to the lengths they've got here, but there should be, I would say you need to have enough data there to be able to represent all the different sort of services you've got and all the different clients that you might have. So I'll just say use your own discretion there. There should be a sufficient amount of data that when you create any queries associated, with the database, that you'll be able to see results being returned there. So that should be sort of what your SQL file and setup file looks like. Testing and sample queries. I've outlined a handful of them here. I may ask you to come up with some extra ones on your own, so be creative. But again, this sort of points back to the seeding the database with actual live data that, running these queries, you should get results back from them. I'm asking you to implement a couple of stored procedures or triggers, and then testing, project report. So the project report I would focus on, again, this should be sort of a narrative type document. And if I can find an example online, I'll sort of give you one. But you may be sort of left to your own to come up with that. But you can certainly take what you're going to submit for the project review week, and you're providing a very short narrative, maybe a sentence or two for each one of those bullet statements there. You can sort of take that and then incorporate that into the actual final project report. And again, this should be a sort of narrative overview. It's not going to be highly technical. It should be one, I mean, my sort of vision for what this looks like, it's going to have some technical data in it, and you may reference like setup scripts and things like that, but this should be one that, maybe the client, a non-technical client, will be able to read and sort of follow what's going on, right? So it's somewhere between, what an engineer or a database administrator would be able to read, and like what a regular person or maybe somebody who works for the wedding agency should be able to read and understand. I mean, obviously that people who own the agency that you're building the database for, they have intimate knowledge of the business requirements, the workflow, all of that. So even though they're not technical, you should be able to sort of read that document and sort of make sense of in a general way, make sense of what's included in it and where it's going. And then the list of the deliverables that I've got here, again, this is for the final project, but I want a single zip file where everything's zipped up there. Again, you're going to include a link to your final ERD diagram, based on the feedback you get from me in the prior week. You may make some changes to it. So, an update, I mean, it's probably going to be the same link, but just if it is the same link, it's fine, but you need to resubmit that. And then the final per project, and make sure any changes that you've made are reflected there. Again, the test and sample queries. So you're going to put that in one document. And then I've got two documents here. Document number one is going to be the dbdiagram.io link that's got your ERD in it. And then also the test and the sample queries that I mentioned. And then document number two is going to be the project report. Again, this is that narrative type document that's going to include, again, everything from sort of what the business is and what it does over to the business requirements to data normalization. And then I've also got the install scripts listed here too. So I'm still fleshing this out. So there may be a couple more things, but by the time you see it, but that's sort of what I'm looking for. Again, this final zip file that includes all of these things. Okay. I'm going to stop there. And again, let me know if you have questions, and good luck.